All right, in this video, we are going to continue our conversation from the last video, gross pay day one. So now this is day two. So what's happening is there's not necessarily going to be a lot of new information being taught here, but we're just kind of taking those concepts from the first video and just applying it to other situations. So here we go. All right, so Toby was hired to work at a factory in Atlanta. The job had an annual salary for 42,000. Toby had a choice when he receives the paycheck. Answer the following question. All right, so if Toby decided to receive his paycheck weekly, okay, weekly. Now, at this point in time, whenever you see the word weekly, you should think to yourself 52. So he would be getting paid 52 times throughout the year. So 42,000 will be evenly distributed between 52 paychecks, and he would be getting paid round to the nearest dollar, 808. Now, if Toby decided to receive his paycheck biweekly, all right, so biweekly again, 26. So with biweekly, that 42,000 will be evenly distributed among 26 paychecks, rounded to the nearest whole would be 1,615. If Toby decides to receive his paycheck semi-monthly, so again, nothing is really being taught here. We're just reinforcing old stuff here. Divided by 24. We get 1750. All right. If Toby decides to receive his paycheck monthly, again, monthly means he's getting paid 12 times a year. Now, notice I'm going kind of fast through these questions because we've kind of already talked about this in the last video, and that would end up being 3,500. Notice that the less you get paid, the more your paycheck is. So, like for example, when someone's getting paid 52 times a year, notice that the paycheck is a lot smaller than if you're only getting paid 12 times. The paycheck's a lot bigger. We'll talk more about that when it comes to budgeting, but you're still getting paid the same amount. It's just in different installments. All right, so Toby's brother John was hired at a job making $21 per hour. If John was working 40 hours per week, which brother would be making more money? Okay, so let's see what we have here. All right, so Toby is working and making $21 per hour. So and I'm assuming it's full time. Yep, 40 hours a week. So what I'm going to have to do is we're going to have to do some comparisons here. So Toby is making $21 a week, but it's full time. So when I do the math, it would be $840 per week. Per week. All right. Now, John, if you remember, he's getting paid $42,000. Now, I'm just going to convert everything to weekly. So John will be making $808 per week. All right, so between the two brothers, who's making more? Oh, I think I got this. Sorry, you're probably yelling at the screen. That's 808, and that's 840. Sorry. There you go. Yep, got it mixed up. So who's making more money? In that case, it'd be John. John is making more money per week, doing that pay conversion. All right. So here we go. George is working as an IT supervisor at a large manufacturing company. He is paid biweekly. I'm just going to go ahead and write 26 because it's biweekly. And his company is changing his schedule to semi-monthly. All right. Semi-monthly. I'm just going to go ahead and write 24. His biweekly gross pay is this. Determine his new semi-monthly gross pay. All right. So basically what's happening is we are taking his biweekly pay and we are converting it to semi-monthly. Okay. Now, if you remember what we talked about in the first video, whenever you're doing a pay conversion, okay, whenever you're doing a pay conversion, step one, convert to yearly. All right. So convert to yearly. That's the first thing you need to do. And then divide. Divide down. Okay. So his biweekly pay is 2,750, which means biweekly he's getting paid that amount for 26 paychecks. So I'm going to times this by 26, which gives me a yearly pay, 2,750 divided by 26. Oop, 2750 times 26, sorry. He's getting paid $71,500 a year. All right. Now, we're now going to divide down to semi-monthly. Now, semi-monthly is divided by 24. And that means he is going to be getting paid I'll get it right, $2,979. All right. Bert is a project manager and he is paid monthly. Again, monthly, I see a word and I write a number on top. And his gross monthly pay is 6,000. His company is changing his pay to biweekly, determined as biweekly. So this is the same type of question, except now we're changing monthly, we're going to biweekly. All right, so this is another pay conversion. So going, and it's already written up here, I'm going to convert his monthly pay. I'm going to convert that to yearly by timesing it by 12. So 6,000 times 12, I think is 72,000. It is 72,000. And then I'm going to divide down to biweekly. Biweekly is 26 times a year, 2,769. All right. All right. So Sarah was hired at a local grocery store. Her hourly wage is $8. Answer the following questions. All right. So if Sarah worked 35 hours, how much would her gross be? Well, 35 hours, very simply, 35 times 8, which gives you 280 bucks. Now, determine Sarah's overtime pay rate, okay? So, overtime pay rate, if you remember, time and a half means you're taking 1.5 and you're multiplying it by whatever her hourly rate is. And her hourly rate is $8. So, she would be getting paid, if she worked overtime, she'd be getting paid $12 an hour, okay? Now, if Sarah worked 43 hours, how much? Now, remember, full time, and I'm going to write it up here just in case you might have forgotten. Full time is 40 hours. Okay? Overtime is anything over 40. Okay? So, what that means is anytime you have a number of hours work that's over 40, you're going to have to divide out the regular time and full time. So, Sarah works 43 hours. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and separate the first 40 hours. All right. The first 40 hours is regular time. So regular time, RT is $40 or 40 hours, and she's getting paid $8 an hour. Okay. I wish that all could fit on one line. Let's see if I can move it a little bit. So the first 40 is always going to be, sorry, my OCD is kicking in. I want that arrow to, there it is, point to 40. Now, anything beyond 40 hours would be considered overtime. So once we take out the first 40 hours, we're left with overtime. So overtime would be 3 hours. Okay? Now, remember, any hour she works above 40, she's getting paid time and a half. So that means she'll be getting $12 an hour for those 3 hours. So that means her hourly rate has gone up. So to figure this question out, we're going to take 40 hours and multiply it by her regular rate for $8. And then she worked 3 hours of overtime, and we're going to multiply that by 12. So 3 hours where she's getting paid $12 an hour. And then after we figure out all that, we're going to add it up, which gives us Sarah's gross pay for this particular week would be $356. Now, for the next question, it says Sarah works 53 hours. So again, we're over 40 hours, so she's going to be working overtime. So again, whenever you're dealing with a situation where there's over 40 hours, the first thing you need to do is shave off the first 40 hours. So 40 hours is overtime or regular time, which means in this situation, overtime would be whatever's left over, which is 13. Now remember, regular time, she's getting paid $8 an hour. Her overtime hours, she's getting paid 12. So basically doing the exact same thing as we did, we are going to take 40 hours at $8 an hour, 13 at 12, multiply everything, and then add, and she ends up with $476 for that particular week. All right. All right. So Lee works for, okay, so this is the exact same question, but we threw in a little curveball here. And the curveball is double time. Okay? And we'll talk about that in a second. So let's first answer a couple questions. All right. So Lee's overtime pay rate, which is time and a half. So this should be relatively simple. He's getting, remember, time and a half means you're multiplying by 1.5 times 10, which means $15 an hour, his overtime rate. Now, his double time, whenever you see double time, all that just means is you're just taking 2 and then timesing it by his hourly rate, which ends up being 20. All right. So if Lee works 66 hours, determine his weekly gross pay. All right. Now, remember, you always have to shear off the first 40 hours. Okay. So the first 40 hours, which is regular time. Okay. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. It says he gets paid double time for any hour over 60. Okay. So what I always like to do is I always like to go straight to double time. So how many hours of double time did he work? All right. So anything over 60 is considered double time. So he worked, so for DT double time, he worked 6 hours. Okay. But he worked 20 hours of overtime. Okay. So OT ends up being 20 hours of overtime. Now, you might be asking, what the heck did you just do? All right, so let me kind of explain it a different way. Let me use like a little line here, okay? Pretend like this is a timeline that represents, okay, this is 0 hours, and this is all the way to 66, okay? Now, I know that the first 40 hours, the first 40 is going to be regular time, always, okay? Anything over 60 would be considered double time, okay? Which means, and let me kind of do some coloring here just to help out. So the first 40 is considered regular time. The last, in this situation, would be double time. But this middle section that's unaccounted for, and I'll just do this in green here, this would be considered overtime, okay? So overtime would be whatever's left over. So overtime, OT, would be the hours between 20 and 60. All right. So that's how we figured out 20 hours. All right. Now, remember his overall rate. So his overall rate, he's getting paid $10 an hour for regular time, $15 an hour for overtime, and $20 an hour for double time. So very simply, I'm just going to multiply 40 times 10, 20 times 15, 6 times 20, and add everything up, and you get his overall gross pay, which in this example ends up being 820 bucks. Okay? Now, same exact question. Now he's working 72 hours. All right? So apparently he is working a lot here. All right? So 72 hours. So again, I'm just going to kind of do a little timeline here, just like I did with the last question. All right? So let me see if I can draw this here. So here is our 0. Here is our 72. Okay? The first 40 hours, I'll just slice it right here, would be considered regular time, RT. Okay? Now notice he works 72. Remember, anything over 60 would be considered double time. All right, so that's DT. All right, so let me go ahead and highlight a little bit. So the first 40 hours is regular time. The last 12 hours is considered double time, which means everything in between, which I'm highlighting just to be different here, would be considered overtime, OT. Okay, so that was 40 hours of regular time. That was 20 hours of overtime, and that was 12 hours of double time. All right, so regular time, again, times 10, overtime, multiply it by 15, and then double time, we multiply it by 20. All right, so after you do all the multiplications, the answer, how much did Lee make for this particular week, working 72 hours, would be 940. All right, so that's the basics. And so hopefully you learned something. Thank you for tuning in, and check out the next video. Have a good day.